Hi guys, my name is Pops Martin and I want to introduce you to RME TotalMix FX, basically the DSP mixer software that comes with most RME products, especially audio interfaces of course. And I just want to show you two pictures before we start. This is one of my studios, or the prior studio space that I had. And this is my current place. It's still a little bit work in progress. But you can see I have quite a bit of gear. You don't see all on this particular picture because there's another room as well. Anyway, so that's basically where I'm working. And if you look at the right side rack beneath the desk, there you might see the RME UFX Plus. And you might also, if you look a little bit closer, see two Ferrofish Pulse 16MX. Each rack got one of these, which basically adds MADI connectivity. Anyway, so that's basically the situation where I'm in. And now let's start talking about this monster here, TotalMix FX. Many people seem to struggle with the concept of TotalMix FX because it's so powerful that it's kind of overwhelming. And you might already notice that I told you I am working on the RME UFX Plus, which has many inputs and many outputs, physical inputs and physical outputs, a total of 94 inputs and 94 outputs. And I have hidden quite a few of them to make it easier to understand, because there's also smaller audio interfaces from RME like the Babyface Pro or whatever. And obviously they have less inputs and less outputs. So just to have kind of a common ground, I have hidden some. I will show you at the end where I can actually display them or can make them reappear. Yeah. But for now, let's just keep it simple. And what I want to try in this particular video is I want to take a simple example, like you are recording music in your studio. No matter if it's a big pro studio or if it's a small home studio, you just want to record something. So how can RME TotalMix FX help you achieve that and do it in a proper way? Okay. So first of all, the very basic stuff is we have 3 lines of channels, or 3 rows of channels. The first one, as it states here, hardware inputs. So that's the physical inputs of the device. And we have quite a few analog inputs. Total number is 8. And then we have 4 microphone preamps built in. And I also added this AES, which can also serve as an SPDIF, coaxial SPDIF, input and output. Anyway, so that's the inputs that I'm showing right now. Then we have the middle row, which is called software playback, which is a little bit confusing, and I will get to this in a second. Just give me a little bit of time. And the bottom row is the hardware output. So that's the physical outputs of the device, right? So if you have to send something, for example, to headphones or to your main monitors in your studio, you would have to send it to these physical outputs. Now, there's lots of faders and stuff, and it's really confusing. I confess, it's kind of confusing if you don't know what's going on. But it's in reality, it's really simple. So, for example, if we look here at the right, that's also physical outputs. They are just assigned to the control room section, but it's also physical outputs. So, for example, here, my main output is basically my monitor speakers. And while this is selected, I can send audio to my main outputs. I won't do that now. I just up the volume just a little bit here, the fader, the output fader. So you can see that now I can mix what I want to hear on my main speakers. So for example, my microphone would go there, and now you can see a little bit of activity here. And here, for example, would be my browser where I can watch YouTube or maybe Spotify or system audio from my PC. And I can also send that. You can even hear it in the background already a little bit, but I remove it again. So you can basically make a mix that is sent to your main monitors. Okay? Now let me turn them down again because I don't want to create feedback or anything. And let's get into the recording situation. Let's start with the inputs. And just as an example, I will say we have a vocal. You see all these generic input names here, which are the physical input names. And we change that. For example, here, which is the microphone I'm talking into right now, we just call that Vox. I double click on this mic 9 in the top. The small box appears and I call this Vox for vocals. Yeah. And then we have an acoustic guitar that we want to record that would come into mic 10. So I just double click there and call that Git. And then maybe we also have a keyboard, which is a stereo. And this is keys. And then maybe we also have, let's just call it a bass. And then we have an e-drum kit. I just keep it simple, yeah? We can go complex, but we keep it simple for now. We have an e-drum kit, and the e-drum kit, the module, the e-drum module, sends a stereo output to the RME, and on analog 5 and 6, and I call this drums. Okay? So now we have basically assigned the names to the input channels that we want to use for our recording. Now, obviously, I have headphones right now because I want to hear what is going into the RME and what I'm recording, and I want to make a monitor mix for myself. So with this channel selected, you can easily select an output channel. Yeah, you can see that it's kind of highlighted. Now I have my phones 1, and I just want to hear, for example, myself, and I want to hear the guitar. I want to hear the drums, I want to hear the bass, and I also want to hear the keys. And obviously I can kind of adjust how much I want. For example, maybe the drums a little bit less and the bass a touch less. I want to properly hear the vocals, of course, and the guitar. Let's say this kind of submix for my headphones would be fine. Right? And now on the phones 2 output of my interface, we want to create a separate mix, which is actually a different mix for the vocalist. So first of all, I add a little bit of output volume to this headphones output. And now what does the vocalist want to hear? Obviously, she wants to hear everything, but in a different kind of mix. She wants to hear just a little bit of drums, but for her, it's important to hear the keys properly, and maybe the guitar properly, and yeah, bass also a little bit, not too much. And obviously, she wants to hear herself. So in this case, it's my microphone right now. It doesn't matter. And this she wants to hear really well. Okay? So now if I switch in the output section from this mixer for the vocalist to my headphones, you will see that the mix changes, the fader position changes, because it's individual mixers for each and every output. Okay? So now we have prepared the headphones mix for the vocalist, and now we want to also create the headphones mix for the other musicians. So we have more outputs here, and I will just use them this way to demonstrate. Sorry, to demonstrate. This one would be Gitmon. So that's the monitor for the guitarist. That's the keys one. That's the bass one. Okay, and that would be the drums mon. So we have now 4 individual mixers again for the monitoring for the rest of the band. Obviously, guitarist again wants to hear himself perfectly. He doesn't need so much of the vocals. Maybe he wants to hear a little bit of the vocals as well, but for him it's important to hear drums and bass, keyboard, yeah, okay. Also something. Then for the keys, I just now, without any sense or meaning, I just move this a little bit around. Vocals he wants to hear as well a little bit. The guitar he wants to hear, but obviously the keys himself he wants to hear a lot. Then same for the bass. Bass wants to hear himself really well. Drums a little bit. Keys, vocals, and the guitarist quite a bit. And now for the drums, he wants to hear himself properly. He doesn't care so much about the vocals, but for him it's important also to hear the bass and a little bit of keys, a little bit of vocals, a little bit of guitar. So now we have created actually already 6 different submixes for 6 headphone outputs that we could configure. And each time when I select a different mixer here in the hardware output section, you will see that the mix changes. The fader position changes because all of them have individual mixes going to their headphones, right? Same with my own headphone. And here are the headphones for the vocalist, yeah? And obviously they get full power here of whatever I mix. And here we don't get full power yet. Let's just push that up, and I don't want to push that up because I'm currently hearing my own voice. I don't want to have it too loud right now, so I leave it at that. So we cannot rename these. These are, once they are in the control room, they get kind of a fixed naming, yeah. And obviously I could also add 2 more on the RME UFX Plus. I can add 2 more to this control room assignment. So for example, phones 3, I could use, let's say, analog 5-6, and I could add phones 4, analog 7-8. So now I have 4 headphones assigned here in the control room section, and 1 main out, which would go to my speakers. But that's not really important. You don't even have to remember that. So I just remove them again from the control room. And, oops, sorry. Okay. Now, one thing though that is important is we have already kind of agreed that my headphones, as an audio engineer or recording engineer, I want to use phones 1 for myself. And if for example, the bassist yells at me and says, I don't have enough drums, I have way too much vocals, how can I check? It would be terrible if I would just get up and take his headphones, put his headphones on and check there, and then go back to my place and put on my headphones and try to fix it. There's a much easier way to do that. So for example, for these headphones 1 that I'm using, I just assign them to the Q PFL, phones 1. Okay? So if I'm listening to my own mix, everything is fine. Now the bassist says my mix isn't what I'm expecting. So what I can do now is I can press on the bass monitoring output, I can press Q, and suddenly I hear exactly the same that the bassist is hearing, right? So now I can already see and hear in my headphones that the vocals is all the way to the left. So I can see here in the top, okay, for his mix the vocals are panned to the left. Let me double click, and now vocals are centered. Yeah. So that's an easy way to check the monitor mix of all the other artists, musicians, and see if something is wrong with their mix. So now I cue the keyboard mix, seems to be fine. The guitar mix seems to be fine as well. How about the drums? Drums seems to be fine as well. And now I just deactivate cue and I have my own monitor mix on my headphones again. Right? So that's really powerful. These kind of cues, monitor cues. So you can check all these submixes that are going to the other musicians easily without moving from your space. It's simple, yeah? So this is something important to keep in mind. This cue PFL to phones 1 to enable me to listen to other submixes instantly. Okay? Now, what I haven't touched yet, I haven't touched many things, right? is this middle row, the software playback. And that's basically audio that is coming from your computer. So for example, if you are on Windows or Mac, doesn't matter, your system audio will likely be routed to the analog 1 and 2. And that's a little bit confusing because the computer itself, like my computer here, never, ever routes directly to analog 1 and 2 physical outputs. It always routes to these channels in the middle row. So you already see that there's quite a bit going on here. That's because in the background I have some music playing just for demonstration purposes. And let's just assume that this would be your system audio. That includes YouTube and Spotify and all these kind of regular stuff that you hear on your computer. So I just call this now PC, for example. Yeah. And then we could have the output of the DAW. If we're using Cubase or Nuendo or Reaper or whatever, we can configure this DAW to output the mix, the stereo out, the main out of the DAW, to send the audio to analog 3 and 4 instead of 1, 2, because now if we do that, we have it separately, which is great. So let's just call this DAW. Okay? So once you hit playback on DAW, it will come through this particular software playback channel and not only through 1 and 2 like everything else. Yeah? And obviously in a DAW you can define more outputs. So let's say in your DAW you don't only have this stereo out mix or main mix going out, but on a different output of your DAW you want to send a click track, like a simple MIDI click track, or yeah, let's just assume that you have a MIDI click track that you want to have separately. So let's just call analog 5 and 6 the click, because now you can mix them individually. So going back to the submixes for the musicians, probably the vocalist on phones 2 doesn't give a shit about a click track because she wants to sing to the other musicians. But the drummer, he really wants to hear the click track properly. So let's up that click track here. And maybe also the bassist wants some click track. Keyboard, maybe not. He will just respond to bass and drums, and same for the guitarist. Maybe they don't want to have the click track, right? They can, of course, but they don't have to. And now, obviously, when you have recorded a take, one song, recorded, live recording, you have recorded it in your DAW, and now you want to play it back to your musicians, and obviously if you play it back to your musicians, they want to hear it on their headphones, and while you are recording, they won't hear anything. So let's just go guitar monitor, keys monitor, all of them want to hear what's coming from the DAW when you play back something in your DAW. Same obviously for me. I also want to hear that, but currently I have set up some activity here. I go crazy when I up that now because I have it on my headphones. And obviously the vocalist also wants to hear and check what's going on, right? So that's a really, really simple, simple application of creating individual submixes, monitor mixes for the musicians that you have in your studio using RME TotalMix FX. And obviously there's a lot more that I might cover in other videos, but for now, this should be enough to get you started how it works. As a bonus, I will just show you one more thing. The vocalist typically really loves for its own feeling to have a little bit effects on his or her headphones, and that's easy to do because here we have a send where we can send something to the effects section, and if we have a look at the effects section, we can add some reverb here, and there's different types of reverbs, and we can easily send that. And then once we send the vocal microphone to the effects, now we can decide where we want the return of the vocal effects. For example, let's just assume that the guitarist or the keyboard player, bass player, drums player or drummer, they don't want to hear any kind of reverb, artificial reverb on the vocals, yeah? But the vocalist wants. So here's this small fader, and we can basically add some of that reverb into the monitor mix of the vocalist. And it will be only the vocalist's voice that gets reverb, because we have not set up any send for the keys, bass, drums or guitar. All these send faders are down, only for the vocalist, right? So that way you can make it feel a little bit more kind of roomy or comfortable, yeah? That was a little bit of a bonus for now. It's enough, I think. And I might or might not do more videos depending on you guys. If you want to see more videos, maybe other practical examples instead of kind of a small band recording, we can also cover some more audio engineering, mixing, mastering stuff using outboard gear. No problem, we can do that. And before I stop that recording, I will just keep my promise that I show you where you can show or hide channels. That's in options, channel layout. And here you can see all the available inputs and outputs. And I have hidden, here in the last row you see hide. There is check marks on this hide for many, many channels. And in the top, we are currently on outputs. And I just select all of them that I have hidden, and bam, and now the playback channels, same, all the ADAT and MADI inputs and outputs back there, and same here, all these, and I hit OK, and now you see this crazy populated window with all these inputs and outputs. I even have to scroll left, right to see all of them, right? So it's getting quite populated. But generally speaking, the concept is the same. No matter how many inputs or outputs your interface has, all of these hardware outputs are basically individual mixers. So it's exactly the same. You can create individual mixes for all these inputs and outputs. I just kept it simple because then it's easier to understand. Because with 49 inputs, 49 outputs. No, sorry, 94. 94 physical inputs, 94 physical outputs, and 94 software playback channels. It can get really complex. And typically, that's nothing you do in a small home studio. You don't need these many inputs and outputs. Yeah, that's it for now, and see you next time. Bye-bye.